Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. I'm Bart Keeler, very pleased to be able to talk about a win for the U.S. women's national team in the SheBelieves Cup. That's what this episode is all about. The U.S. women are champions of the SheBelieves Cup for the fourth time. They stood atop the podium at the end of the annual celebration of women in sport that they host. And to help me break all the action down of the three matches the United States played will be Jackie Gutierrez from womenkickballs.com. Make sure to give her a follow on Twitter at womenkickballs. She will join me later on in this episode after I go through kind of a quick summary of each match. Before we get there, make sure to subscribe to Soccer Down Here on your favorite podcatcher so you don't miss an episode of Soccer for Us or the daily Soccer Down Here show. Also, please give the show a follow on Twitter at Soccer for Us Pod. I would love the feedback. I would love the interaction on Twitter. And as always, if you have thoughts or questions or takes from any U.S. news, mention us on Twitter at Soccer for Us Pod so we can include it on this show. Well, now that that is out of the way, let's talk about the U.S. women winning the SheBelieves Cup. They won 3 matches. They conceded 0 goals. They scored 9 goals. And you would think that that was probably a really great week for the United States women. But honestly, it was a little bit of, I don't want to say a disappointment because that's not fair, but it wasn't what we expected, right? We kind of expected much better showings against Canada and Brazil specifically. The Argentina match kind of played out how I think most people thought it would. In the opening match, the U.S. beat Canada 1-0, but struggled to find an offensive rhythm against the Canadian press. They had to rely on individual play and kind of weren't the fluid passing team that we had kind of seen them grow into under Vlatko and Danovsky. However, they still manufactured 29 shots, 9 of those on target, but it took a 79th minute Rose Lavelle winner for the team to really feel like they had accomplished anything. Now, granted, Lavelle and her teammates were pretty effective all night getting chances around goal, but it just was a struggle for the U.S. to find any quality chances in front of goal. But this one came on a ball played back to her from Lindsey Horan off of a set piece, which was nice to see. We scored only like 2 of these kind of trash goals all tournament. And that's something that honestly the U.S. women have done well against teams like that are, a little bit lesser quality than they are. So the U.S. beats Canada 1-0 in the opening match. Again, the one goal was a little bit of a disappointment, but honestly, Canada came ready to play. They came with a great game plan, and the U.S. had to adjust and didn't adjust that well. In the second match on Sunday, the United States beat Brazil 2-0. This is a match where we saw some of the adjustments game to game and in-game take place really well. Early offense showed an improved game plan for the U.S. women, and Kristen Press's 11th minute goal teased what we thought was going to be an easy win for the reigning world champs. However, they struggled to put Brazil away. The Brazilian women picked off U.S. passes kind of in that spot between midfield and the Brazil's, true defensive third. And they were able to use those turnovers to spring counterattacks and get some pretty good looks on the U.S. goal. Even despite that, though, the U.S. always looked like they kind of had the advantage in the match, but it wasn't until Megan Rapinoe's 88th minute goal that was truly secure. Lindsey Horan notched her second assist on the day and the third of the tournament. She drifted wide again. This was a key for both of these goals. Drifted wide to the right and fired across into a streaking Pino who really coolly finished it. And honestly, Pino proved that she's the best finisher the U.S. has on the roster right now. In the final match, the United States dismantled Argentina 6-0. It was actually not terrible for the Argentina for like the first 15 minutes, 10 minutes really, but it quickly became just a helter-skelter moment for the Argentinian backline almost the rest of the match. Rapinoe scored in the 16th and 22nd minutes on assists from Carly Lloyd, and then Lloyd scored for herself in the 36th minute, and Christy Mewis scored in the 41st minute as the U.S. took a 4-0 lead into halftime. Then Kristen Press and Alex Morgan found the net in the second half to push the final score to 6-0. All of these goals were a welcome relief after the team struggled to finish their chances all tournament. Again, the U.S. conquered Orlando, going 3-0-0 with 9 goals scored and 0 conceded. It wasn't all perfect, even though the record says otherwise. Personally, I have questions. I'm positive that Vlatko Antonovsky has many more questions after watching his team get knocked off their game so easily by Canada and Brazil to an extent. But on the whole, this is a good confidence building session for the United States. You came off some matches against Colombia that really weren't competitive at all. Finally got some more level competition with Canada and Brazil coming in. And, it wasn't, I think the expected bashing of Canada or Brazil, especially Canada missing several of their key European players. I know we talked about them playing in the preview pod, but that was my bad. I should have done a little bit better research to truly understand that, look, Alana Cook wasn't being released from PSG, so Ashley Lawrence wouldn't either. And yes, Katarina Macario got released by Lyon, but a lot of the French clubs weren't releasing players, so that meant Khadijah Buchanan also wasn't coming, and Jordan Hutima wasn't coming either. It wasn't the strongest Canadian squad, and so I think a lot of fans thought the U.S. would blitz Canada. But credit Bev Priestman in her first game in charge of the Canadian women team. She had them organized, she had them hungry and ready to fight. But at the end of the day, the United States, personally, I'm sad that we didn't score as many goals, and I'm sad that we kind of looked a little unpolished with our passing. There was some crispness that was lacking. But at the end of the day, I think we manufactured like 70 some shots over the 3 matches, and eventually that is going to just fall the right way for the team. So you can be nitpicky, and I have been. I wrote a piece for Soccer Down Here talking about how, while the 3 wins and 9 goals and 0 conceded is good, there are some questions that I still have for Vlatko. I do want to read some Twitter reactions that I received. So again, you can follow us on Twitter at SoccerForUsPod. Make sure to respond or reply or tag or whatever. If you have something newsworthy that you want to talk about and you want me to talk about this on the podcast, tag me at SoccerForUsPod. The first one comes from Mike McGregor at MikeyMac0908 on Twitter. He said, "Solid improvement from match to match. Some tough decisions ahead. Obviously, pretty set it forward, but tough to keep Christy Mewis, Davidson, Purse, Sonnet. Made strong statements and attempting to lock down roster spots. Wouldn't want to be Vlatko making those calls." And that's right. This was supposed to be a tournament that was kind of hopefully going to be a tournament that Vlatko Antonovsky could look at and truly take stock of the player pool and create a solid 18-woman roster for the Olympics. And I don't think that he truly has that ready. And that's not a bad thing. It's a little bit because some players didn't play super well. It's a little bit because there were a lot of good options and players, for the most part, did okay. So thanks, Mike, for the Twitter comment. The next one comes from Andrew Bucciolato, who says, "A win is a win. That's all that matters. With limited training and restrictions, I'd say it was good showing, and now we know what to improve upon to help keep growing players and the team." I kind of agree with that, Andrew. I mean, this has been a team that's been in camp for, kind of a couple months now, here and there, with the Colombia matches in Orlando in January and then leading up to the SheBelieves Cup. But you're right. I mean, training is never the way that it's training right now during COVID is not what it used to be like post or pre-COVID, where, you had unlimited training basically with your team. There's so many restrictions about who can do what and when and with whom, especially if you maybe have a positive test or a scare. But to your point of a win is a win, that's right. You got 3 wins, and it's hard to argue with that, especially when you look at how, especially in the last game, a pretty good showing, 6-0 against Argentina. And Vlatko can look at this and truly evaluate some players on where they need to grow individually and how they need to get better individually so that his team can perform better. Because I think, for me, the thing that was a little concerning was that the team in the first game against Canada, that was the most unorganized offensively they've looked in a while, especially under Vlatko. So definitely areas of improvement. So thank you, Andrew, again, at A2Booch on Twitter. So those are the Twitter responses that I got. Thank you to Andrew and Mike for those comments. I really do appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerForUsPod. Now, I'm going to break from my own talking and talk with Jackie Gutierrez from WomenKickballs.com in the next segment. So join me there. This episode of Soccer for Us is sponsored by American Football Provisions, a soccer apparel company created for supporters by supporters of the beautiful game. American Football Provisions is proud of our women's national team and wants to congratulate them on their 4th SheBelieves Cup championship and 4th World Cup championship. To celebrate all the past, present, and future female American footballers, AFP has teamed up with Atlanta designer Chris Morrison to create the Play Like a Girl USA scarf. The scarf displays the phrase "Play Like a Girl" as though there's stripes on the American flag, and also features 4 stars for each year the USWNT conquered the world: 91, 99, 15, and 19. Pick yours up today at AmericanFootballProvisions.com. That's American Football, Futbol, Provisions.com. Make sure you order before March 8, 2021, and get free shipping on your order. All right, Soccer for Us listeners, it is now time to really dig into the SheBelieves Cup victory for the United States. And to do that, I'm bringing on Jackie Gutierrez, the writer and founder of Women Kickballs. She is a woman whose perspective on women's soccer is both immersive and gracious. I am very eager to talk with her about this tournament and the U.S. women's national team as a whole. So, Jackie, welcome, and tell us about Women Kickballs and this awesome sticker that people can get.
Yeah, for sure. So Women Kickballs, just a disclaimer, by the way, people, especially men, are always like, oh my gosh, what did you say? But I promise it's just a website. So womenkickballs.com, you can get like free, like quality content on women's soccer. A lot of times you have to pay subscription fees, or you can like only read 2 paragraphs in and like, can't see the full article. So yeah, you get free content on the women's game, and yeah, you get a free sticker when you become an email subscriber and you join the 500 plus list. So that's very exciting. Snail mail is a thing that I'm bringing back. So with that sticker, we're kind of just going to go for it and send a few. And yeah, you'll get a personalized note just showing my appreciation. So it's a way to just document women's soccer in an authentic voice. And yeah, you get overall just support like an independent journalist. So again, that just like means so much whenever I get to like interact or like meet people through that.
I'm glad for social media. That's how we connected.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, to jump right into the SheBelieves Cup, I mean, the U.S. goes 3-0-0. They have 9 goals for, 0 against. They go to the top of the podium for the second year in a row, back-to-back SheBelieves Cup titles. It seemed almost unsatisfactory at points. I really think the reason that people kind of felt that way is a little bit of an overreaction to the match against Canada. The U.S. only wins 1-0. They get that late goal by Rose Lavelle. And it really just felt like they were a little bit out of sync throughout the match. But, what was your take from the performance in that USA win over Canada?
When I look at that game with Canada, gosh, yeah, I have several thoughts. But first, I would say, sure, like the U.S. was sloppy, but I also think Canada like really made their mark starting out. And obviously they like struggled throughout the tournament. But for Canada, it was just really incredible to see like after a year, of not playing, they come out and they hold the U.S. for like almost 80 minutes. Like how incredible is that, especially with a roster that doesn't have like many veteran players on it. And I think even with the new head coach, Bev Priestman, like, gosh, good for her, because she was just over here like making moves and learning. And so, yeah, I think it's really incredible as far as Canada's end of what they were able to do and just how they were able to dominate on the field and really challenge the U.S. So, again, like thinking of the U.S. side, I would say that, yeah, it was just a little rough for us. I don't think that like really had our feet on the ground, trying to figure out so much. And so, yeah, thinking of it of the U.S. perspective, it just felt like this isn't us. We're struggling, but like, how do we like come back from this? And then again, obviously you saw that in Brazil where they kind of took some things and applied it in that match too.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, we get the 1-0 win over Canada. We do get a 2-0 win over Brazil. And going from what the Canada match was to the Brazil match, I definitely would say that it was an improvement. I think Brazil is a vastly better team than Canada, as we kind of saw, at least this version of Canada's team, the one that played in the SheBelieves Cup. So, if this is a tune-up for the Olympics, you beat an Olympic qualified team in Brazil 2-0. You looked pretty okay. And yeah, you had some vulnerabilities at the back, but where do you think that, going from game to game, what struck you as the biggest difference between the Canada match and the Brazil match?
Yeah, well, when you look at the opponents, like you were saying, they're both Olympic qualifying teams. So I think that is, in a sense, they're kind of on an equal playing level. Argentina, obviously, it's a little bit different there. But with Brazil and Canada, I mean, what the biggest difference that I noticed right off the bat is that, I mean, the U.S. scored a goal in the 11th minute against Brazil. I mean, they're already an intense team to begin with. Like, you look at Marta, and it's like, oh my gosh, like legend and so intimidating, and just so great at what she does. And so, when I look at that match, I think, wow, they scored in the 11th minute in one game, and then in the other, it took them to the second half. So I think that kind of already brings about some not concerns, but I guess more just so questions like, well, what was working and what's different? And again, I think it kind of, in my mind, it kind of seems flipped, whereas like Brazil should have held them off until the 79th minute, whereas Canada did that. And so I think it was just really interesting to see, they got another goal, sure, in this match of winning 2-0, but I think with Brazil in general, they're just such an intense team. So it's like kind of crazy. I think also, with their, just their presence and the reputation in the game, that's also kind of expected to see, okay, Brazil is really going to come out and not going to give them like an easy win, or, I felt like it was a little bit more challenging on that end for sure.
Yeah, that's a good point that, Brazil was probably the most challenging of the opponents. And you get the early goal. And to be quite honest, I mean, Lynn Williams had a chance in like the second minute. There were opportunities throughout the match. Yes, Brazil also had opportunities. That's because they're a good team. And it felt like this was probably this is also, in my opinion, a more first choice starting 11. You had Alex Morgan and Kristen Press starting. So I guess to me, the biggest difference between Canada and Brazil was, quite honestly, I thought there were like a much better complete team on the field. So I'm just wondering, like, as you look at Canada and Brazil, and then you see that they kind of struggled to score. But Argentina, you get a 6-0 win, right? Yeah. We talked about that domino. You talked about that domino effect earlier. And it didn't come against Brazil, and it didn't come against Canada. It didn't come against Brazil, even though we got the early goal. It took a little bit to come against Argentina, but finally we do see that, like, the U.S. getting that early goal and then just pummeling a team. What can you take from the Argentina match?
Yeah, I think when you look at that match, there's so many pockets that my mind goes to. Like, when that match was happening, I literally was on my way home, 30 minutes, drive, and they already were at 4-0. I was like, like you're just, going with all this action right away. So the fact that I like jumped into the match kind of like more towards the second half, I mean, from what I noticed, again, it was just like that crazy effect where you see goal after goal. And I mean, they're really quality plays. I think Megan Rapinoe's second goal, I just, like, on the highlights, I just kept rewatching it because I was like, did she really do, like, how crazy to just find that timing, just right, and to really secure that ball to the back of the net. And even with Laco in the press conference afterwards, what I thought was interesting that he said was that he was talking about, the performance against Argentina, and said that it's hard to break a team down because it takes time to figure out angles, to see how quick you can find your way through the defense. And so he was talking about it from a tactical perspective. But I thought, wow, is it hard to break through Argentina, or if it took you some time? I mean, you really got 6-0. So what about the first two games? Like, what really, that took a lot of time then to kind of figure out how to break them. So I think when I look at his response, it's like, well, how do you like kind of approach that from, the beginning of the tournament, where we just really kind of felt a little off, and not like the US that we're used to seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you can look at the Argentina match, and they played okay for like 10 minutes, right? They were pretty defensively okay. And then, I mean, Pino and Lloyd, actually, the first goal from from the two. Like, it was just their experience, I think, knowing when to make a run and when to kind of hold off. The Christy Mewis goal I thought was like my favorite because it was a great run. It was a great run by Mewis to see where the space was. A fantastic cut pass, like almost no look from Megan Rapinoe, and then an amazing kind of open your body up and turn from Mewis to find, on her left foot, the opposite corner. It looked more like what we're used to seeing from the U.S. And maybe it's a good thing that like you struggled early in the tournament to get to a team that was kind of, a little bit easier so that you could use the challenges early on in the tournament to kind of work out your kinks and then really get those like on the field ironed out against a team that honestly is just not the quality you are. I'm wondering, like, kind of this is a question to talk about the whole tournament, but I mean, it's good to win, but it's also sometimes good to have struggles and challenges in a match. What do you think Vlatko took from the tournament as a whole when he looked at, not just game to game, but like game to game and the whole thing?
Yeah, and just kind of listening to conversations with him and, afterwards in interviews, kind of like, I guess the vibe that I got from him was just like, yeah, we won. We take, these games and we look at them. And I think for him, what I've noticed a lot is like, he is always looking at the stats of like every single game. Like he comes out of the press conferences with like a piece of paper ready before like, he gets into questions. So I think for him, he's really looking at like numbers and tactical perspectives and what players are doing what, passing. From that, he just mentioned, he was like, yeah, we're going to like continue to do our research. Like we have our analytical team and we're going to continue like scouting for the Olympics. So I was like, wow, this guy is just like on it with his numbers and his stats. But yeah, I think kind of to your point again of just like, looking at the struggles and finding ways to work that out. And I think what I would say in terms of the learning aspect of it, I think you really see a lot of, again, that player chemistry and what's working and how you can adjust to. I mean, you have injuries with Sam Mewis wasn't on the pitch. We're so used to seeing her and just trying to figure out how to adjust and also like, again, make that work.
Yeah, he seems like a very prepared and studied coach. I think that's a great way to describe him. Last question really about the SheBelieves Cup specifically and the U.S. performance. I described this performance from the U.S. as kind of wasteful. And by that, I mean, like I think they had like 74 or 5 shots in total throughout the tournament. That's a lot. When you talk about 3 games, that's, more than 20 shots a game, but they only scored 9 goals, which sounds like, oh, they only scored 9, but really they just struggled to actually score. So like I said, my one word would be wasteful, but I'm wondering if you have like a one word or one thought about the tournament as a whole.
Ooh, that's a good question. Gosh, I feel like I'm never good at one words because I'm like, well, and then I go on like 5 words. Okay, this is so basic, but I guess just going with like growth of, sure, we've like learned from the experimentation that was done on the field, but like, again, like you said, there was only 9 goals that they scored. So like, there's so much more to continue giving. So, I feel like it's kind of that middle ground where it's like, yeah, some things worked and we saw growth, but overall, like, I don't think that was really the best performance, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I like that. Growth is a good one. Cause I think that's a little bit of a term to describe the transition now from Jill to Vlatko, because like, how do you go from winning back-to-back World Cups under one coach to now, you have to figure out what your next step is. And I think there is an evolution aspect to that. So good word. Okay. So I do want to talk a little bit about Vlatko because he has 16 wins in a row. He got hired at the very end of 2019, but like had a couple of games there, had through SheBelieves Cup in 2020, but really after that, it was a struggle. He was able to scout a little bit through NWSL and FA Women's Super League and stuff like that, but he wasn't really able to see a lot of his players in person, especially with the very abbreviated NWSL season. So I feel like he has this great vision for where he wants the team to be. And I felt like he has done a good job of putting the team in positions to execute that vision. I'm wondering what you think of just the overall mentality and state of the team now at the beginning of 2021 heading into the Olympics? Where do you evaluate this team right now?
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to kind of bring to the table, because like you said, 2020 was kind of like sporadic with Challenge Cup stuff and players just trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
And I think with 2021, just evaluating this team, I think, again, there's a lot of younger players coming in, and then you also have veterans. And so there's this kind of like mix where you have not the new and the old, but like you have some like history, and then you also have players who, like, sure, they're great, incredible players, have played at the youth level, at the club, are playing at the club level now. And so I think it's just this matter of like finding what works and what meshes well, because when it comes to the Olympics, I mean, choosing 18, roster spots, gosh, like so much pressure. So I think, overall, I see this team, and to me, it kind of feels a little bit different, just compared to teams past, even the 2019 Women's World Cup team. I mean, you look at that team, and I feel like there was more older and like veteran players, like even Jessica McDonald. She's not like a veteran, but she's older. And so with her like history in the league, I think, this team right now, if you look at like the most recent roster, it's like, wow, you kind of have like almost an even split of younger and older players. And so I think it'll just be interesting to see like, the veteran players who obviously like retire or like kind of phase out, and then along with what they're passing down to the next generation. I know that's like such a basic like circle of life common thing to think about, but it's really crazy when you think of just the women's game and where we're at, and like how they're preparing and just like looking forward to the Olympics. And even just saying that is crazy because there was so much concerns if that was even happened this year again or not. So I just look at it and think, wow, like I think like even with Sam Ewis alone, just her success at the end of last year, I was just so blown away to see someone like her who is just so incredible at the club level and then has made her way to the national team, and just players like her who are constantly like raising the bar even higher. So I think overall it's going to be just something that continues to like blow us away. So I'm excited about that.
I like that you mentioned the new players on the roster, because I think Vlatko, having coached in NWSL, is able to kind of understand that this new domestic league is providing a lot of players who might not have had a chance otherwise to really shine and show that they deserve a chance on the women's national team. I also, this is a weird year for the U.S. I have been on record saying that I'm really not a fan of Megan Rapinoe and Carly Lloyd being on the roster going forward. Nothing against them. I think they are fantastic players, and I think they have done wonders for this program and women in sport as a whole. But we're at 2021. They're not going to be on the 2023 World Cup roster. They're just not. Sorry. And I want to move on from them, but we're stuck in this weird cycle where, like, usually the Olympic cycle is the farewell for these players, right? Like, it's the last hurrah for your older players who go, okay, get that gold medal and go home. And we didn't have that transition because of, usually you would have had World Cup in 2019, you would have had Olympics in 2020, but with the postponement, we're seeing people like Carly Lloyd, like Megan Rapinoe stay on this roster. I guess my question really is, looking at the Olympics, what did you like? Who played themselves off this roster for the Olympics from this tournament? I know who my two are, but I'm wondering if you have anyone else who didn't rise to the occasion.
Right. Yeah. I think. I know when we were talking about this before. It's such a tough I think thing to narrow down specifically. Again, just because we don't have the full scope of even Mallory Pugh or just other players that we're kind of used to seeing on the team. I'm looking at the roster right now, just looking through these names, but
it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard, but I would have to go with, probably Lynn Williams and Carly Lloyd, how you were saying. When I was thinking about it too afterwards, just thinking about Carly Lloyd, I mean, she's almost 40, which is crazy.
I mean, that's just impressive, but yeah, it is a little.
Yeah. Thinking of just Carly Lloyd and who she is as a person, as a player, I'm wow, this woman just doesn't give up. So I wouldn't be surprised if she still found a way to made her make her stance and her presence known to be on the Olympic roster. But yeah, I would have to go with those two players as well, just because I think, yeah, again, it's hard to narrow down. Even like looking at Tiarna Davidson, I feel like we kind of didn't see like maybe a whole lot from her this tournament. And yeah, even just in the past like couple games at the US, it's not a face that I like see a lot or like hear a lot about. Yeah, I guess that's just kind of my 2 cents of like players I don't see a whole lot from, and then players who I'm like, oh, I don't really know. Like it's kind of more questionable, but again, you never know like what can happen. So it'll be interesting to see what that 18 roster looks like.
Yeah, the Davidson, I think her and Emily Sonnet are kind of competing for that extra center back / outside back spot because they both kind of have a little bit of versatility. I think that's the key, right? Like you look at the Olympic roster, it's 18 players. You have to be versatile. That's kind of why, to me personally, Carly Lloyd is off the Olympic roster because, again, I'm not trying to say like she's not a great player or has like people like you can't like they take it like you can't criticize one of these players. I'm like, no, like it's not a criticism. It's just a fact that Carly Lloyd is a one-trick pony, and the fact that she can play center forward, and that's it. But she's not your starting center forward, right? Like that's Alex Morgan, in my opinion. So if you want to have someone who is a backup center forward, you'd like for them to also be able to maybe play in other positions. So that's where I think Lynn Williams has a strong case. Also, Katarina Macario, who has played as that center striker position as well. Like to me, that's the key is being able to play multiple positions will be a benefit if you're trying to make this roster. That's why I think Midge Purse is, I don't want to say shoo-in, but I think she's a very likely candidate because she can play kind of anywhere on the right side. That we could talk. I mean, there's a lot that we can talk about Olympic roster, and there will be many. Yeah, there'll be plenty of time to talk Olympics for the U.S. women and men as we get closer to that. But I do want to move away from that, and I want to talk about you specifically. You are a young woman who's a women's soccer journalist specifically. What inspired you to go down this path?
Yeah, so I actually have been pursuing sports journalism since I was 17, and if like people this was like video and they saw me, they're like, what? Like you still look 17. So like, that's weird, but I promise you not. I always get like mistaken for being younger, which is funny, but yeah, I initially just like grew up playing soccer for about 10 years. Had to stop my senior year of high school just for health reasons. And that was just like devastating. And I always like showed up to soccer practice though, like reading books and like wanted to be a writer, but just like didn't know what that looked like. And so, yeah, I remember being 17 years old and my Uncle Joe, he had one day asked me and he was like, Jack, what do you want to do after high school? And I was like, oh my gosh, like I haven't even thought about that. But I was like, I don't know. Yeah, I was like, I want to be like a sports journalist for women's soccer, but I don't really know like how to do that or like get started. And my like mindset was just like, oh, you go to college, get a job, get a degree, get a job, and like then do your thing. And he was like, well, why don't you just start now? And so, yeah, I just took his advice and literally like started a really lame like WordPress blog and started writing and just kind of like got internships and was writing for different publications. And yeah, I really had always wanted to like have my own brand of content. So Woman Kick Balls was just like a random name I came up with my Uncle Joe. And like he's been just so like helpful in my growth as a journalist and what I do in my career, because he's predicted things about me since I was younger that I never thought possible. And like seeing them now, it's just so crazy to have someone like that. I mean, of course, like my parents' support is great, but they're always like, yeah, like we believe in you. And like, whatever.
It's different, right? Like, yeah, like,
like you can tell you like that you're good at anything and you'll believe and be like, okay. But like to have my Uncle Joe was like, whoa, like he's a business guy and like, he's pretty like professional what he does. So I think it was just like a really cool outsider's perspective of seeing like, oh, okay, I have some potential outside of my parents. Yeah. Like, this could happen. So I actually just got off the phone with him before this. But yeah, I'm always just like asking him questions or he's giving me advice. And so I've just grown a lot in that from this like little dream and like now to having over like 500 email subscribers and like growing that. And so I love that I just get to connect with people, over soccer, like meeting you over social media, like, just crazy stuff. But that's just kind of how it works. And so I'm excited to see where this is going.
That's awesome. I mean, I think we all need an Uncle Joe in our life that really
Oh,
does inspire and push us. That's a really awesome story. Now,
yeah.
you are, I mean, a full-fledged, journalist. You're in it every day. You're going to school, you're working, but you're also doing this as like, I can't even call it a side hustle, right? Like this is it's like you got three full-time jobs.
Yeah, it's crazy.
What all do you have going on in your life right now?
That's a great question. I probably have like honestly 5 calendars I'm looking at. Okay, probably 3. But to keep me on track. So yeah, I am a full-time grad student studying journalism at the University of Oregon. Go Ducks. So yeah, I graduated from my undergrad in last year, May of 2020. I was actually the first student to graduate with a journalism minor. My school was kind of small. We didn't have journalism classes, and so yeah, at first it kind of felt like my passion for journalism and women's soccer was very separate from school, which is weird, but I saw the two merge and it was just really awesome. So yeah, I'm still in kind of student mode until June. And then I have a full-time job as a marketing manager for a construction company. So
Oh, wow.
it's interesting because it's U.S. Women's national team, there's this huge deal of equal pay. And I'm oh yeah, now I kind of know what that is to go to your employer and make your stance. I'm hey, I need equitable pay, which, just different things like that. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, obviously I do Women Kickballs, which, yeah, I guess kind of like a side hustle, side business, whatever. And just figuring out what that looks like as an entrepreneur and making money, not because I'm oh my gosh, I need to get rich from this, but just yeah, having a business budget and being able to travel and go to games. And so, yeah, that's what I do. I spend a lot of time, my days are just jam packed from 7 a.m. to probably 10:30, constantly doing meetings and different things. So I definitely stay busy, but I love it. And yeah, I just love that I'm also getting to pursue education in this as well. And just yeah, talking to other people and learning. I'm always asking questions, even to people at games or over Zoom and stuff. So for me, I just love learning and soaking it all in. And so I think this is a perfect way to do that, specifically even with women's soccer too.
That's really cool. Glad you're finding time to do this particular passion that you have.
I think that's what's so great about soccer is that you get to connect with people. Obviously games aren't the same right now, but I remember going to my first game at 17 or actually for my 18th birthday. And literally just bonding with strangers over soccer players.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen in a lot of areas. So I'm sure you can probably relate to that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's been honestly, the hardest thing of COVID has been the fact that I have not been able to I'm in 3 different soccer group chats, but it's not the same as getting together
Right.
and really meeting and talking and going to the games with each other and the tailgate before and everything.
Watch parties and
We're
whatnot.
not doing Zoom watch parties. That's a little bit too much, to be quite honest. We just text. I don't it's we're gonna text during the game anyway. So we just do it that way. But yeah, it's still it's different than being in person with each other and sharing in that communal experience. But hopefully soon this year we will be able to experience that. We have a ton of U.S. women's games on the docket for this year, as well as men's games coming up. I will talk about that in my next segment when I give you all some news updates. But the last question for you, and it's all about you again. Where tell us all that we can find you. What's your socials? Give us all that again.
Okay, all the deeds. So yeah, Woman Kickballs, you can find it on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I think I even have Pinterest, which I don't use a whole lot. But yeah, it's all at Woman Kickballs. So you can go on there, follow. And specifically with Twitter, what I do during press conferences is I tweet basically the quotes from players, coaches, so you get some exclusive stuff there. So that's always a plus. And then, yeah, on the website is womankickballs.com. So when you go on there, you can – even if you don't subscribe, you still get access to free articles. But I mean, you're already there, so you might as well just subscribe so you can get notifications. So yeah, that's kind of just the general thing. A lot of things are coming and things are happening, but those are the main ones that I use right now.
Well, there you go. Follow Jackie at Women Kickballs on any social media site, and make sure you subscribe. WomenKickballs.com. Go subscribe, get your free sticker, and put it somewhere that you can show off your love for both Jackie and women's soccer as a whole.
Yeah, and actually just a quick bonus or thing on that with stickers. I'm just kind of going ham right now, and I usually just give one, but I'm giving 2, 3.
There you go.
you subscribe, you're just going to get like a few extras. So might as well.
That's awesome. Well, Jackie, thank you so much for being on this episode of Soccer for Us with me. It was fun to watch the U.S. women play, and it's fun to watch them win, and it's fun to watch them win another SheBelieves Cup.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. Like you said, I know we could talk like easily another hour. So super excited for all of the matches that are going to come as well this year, and just even the Olympics. So exciting. So I know there'll be a lot of just, again, WOSO Twitter, might as well just follow it on there. But yeah, there's so much good soccer coming our way.
Well, thanks again to Jackie Gutierrez for joining us on this episode of Soccer for Us to break down the SheBelieves Cup victory by the U.S. women's national team, their second in a row. Now let's talk about some U.S. soccer headlines. Earlier this week, CBS Sports and their streaming platform Paramount Plus announced that they had picked up the English language broadcast rights for CONCACAF national team competitions, starting with the Nations League final in June. The media rights deal includes more than 200 matches with all 41 member nations, including qualifiers for the 2022 World Cup and the 2023 Women's World Cup, and also future Nations League competitions, so both men's and women's. The streaming platform already has exclusive rights to the UEFA Champions League and Europa League that will continue on. It also picked up Argentina's Liga Profissional de Futbol and Brazil's Campeonato Brasileiro. Now, it's still a little unclear how this will affect U.S. Men's World Cup qualifying broadcast. They have stated that they would have English language rights to all CONCACAF qualifiers played outside of the U.S. and Mexico. So that would lead you to believe that all home U.S. games and that game in Mexico would be on some other platform besides CBS Sports / Paramount Plus. So not quite sure where games will be located yet, but we do know that CBS Sports and their streaming platform Paramount Plus has picked up a lot of CONCACAF content. Also this week, the men's Olympic qualifying preliminary roster was released. 48 players were named to this list. They will be whittled down to 20, including 3 goalkeepers, for the men's Olympic qualifying competition that starts in March. Now, I don't want to run through the whole roster, but 3 pieces of headlines that I want you to be aware of. First, Efrain Alvarez, the U.S.-born Mexican international, was listed on both the U.S. and Mexico's U23 Olympic rosters for this, iteration. Efrain was born in LA. He plays for LA Galaxy, so he is American by birth, but his father and family are from Mexico, and he's played for the Mexican national teams at all the youth levels. So he is tied to Mexico. He would have to file a one-time switch to be able to play for the U.S. in not only this competition, but going forward. And if he does file that switch, he is locked into the U.S. So he technically doesn't have to make a decision right now. He could play for Mexico in this tournament. He could play for Mexico at the Olympics. He could play for Mexico basically until he goes to like an actual senior level competition. And then he would be able to change to the U.S. So right now, he may not want to choose the U.S. and lock that in. Anyway, it's a developing story. Obviously, Efrain is a coveted commodity, a coveted player by both the USA and Mexico. And it's kind of cool to see this battle to go on between players of his type of lineage. Also, Brendan Aronson is listed on this roster. Now, this is a little intriguing because he's the only guy who's getting minutes for a European club who is listed on this roster. Now, he was actually listed as a Philadelphia Union player, but we all know that he plays for Red Bull Salzburg. In fact, he played this week in Europa League, even though they got knocked out. So he's playing in the Austrian Bundesliga, often, pretty much starting or appearing in almost every match since he moved to Austria. And it's curious to me that he was listed on this preliminary roster because I don't know why you would list him now if you don't think and plan on having him for the tournament in March. Now, Jesse Marsch, the American coach of Red Bull Salzburg, has coached in the U.S. men's national team system before. So it's not surprising if he would allow Brendan to go to this tournament. Salzburg probably, I don't want to say they won't miss him. That's not fair to him or Salzburg, but they can afford to miss Brendan for 3 weeks and be just fine in the Austrian Bundesliga. But he is on the roster, so I do expect that he will get that call from Jason Kreis and Greg Berhalter for the tournament in March. And then lastly, as an Atlanta United fan and speaking to a largely Atlanta United audience right now, it's pretty cool that 3 Atlanta United players have been named to this roster: George Bello, Miles Robinson, and Brooks Lennon. Now, George and Miles both were on that roster in January that kind of was that split camp of U23s and senior national team players. Both of them did well enough in that camp to warrant an inclusion in the January friendly. In fact, Miles started. George came in for about 30 minutes in the second half. So it's not a surprise that they are on this roster. They've clearly been in the plans of both Berhalter and Kreis for this tournament. However, Brooks Lennon really hasn't had a shout at any U.S. men's national team, anything, since last year when he was included on this same preliminary roster for the Olympics, but he hasn't played for the U.S. in a very long time. He was a pretty solid player at the youth level, at the U17 and U20 level. So it's not a surprise in that regard that he's on the radar, but he hasn't really been involved at all. It's kind of nice to see that. I don't know if he'll make the final roster. I don't know if Atlanta United would release all 3 of them, considering that the tournament would end like 7 days before their first match in CONCACAF Champions League. And that'll be something that I would imagine several MLS clubs will have to deal with. But it's good to see 3 players from Atlanta United get onto this roster. Now, you may not think this is super pressing news, but the U.S. Soccer has their annual general meeting coming up this weekend. They had their board meeting on Friday, and I want to run through a couple of headlines of importance from that meeting. First, we now know the U.S. men's national team schedule for the rest of the year, and actually through the first quarter of 2022. So I'll run through that real quick. Now, we had a friendly scheduled on March 28th versus Northern Ireland in Belfast. We have now been told that there will be a match on Thursday, March 25th, reportedly against Jamaica in Belfast as well. That is not a surprise. Jamaica is one of the very few teams available in this window, and it makes sense to stay in Belfast, and Jamaica has some European-based players that they can call in as well. So 2 friendlies in March, then Nations League in June 3rd and June 6th, in Chicago, CONCACAF has said, with no fans. And then U.S. Soccer told us that they definitely will have a June 9 friendly, meaning they will have 3 games in that window to mimic a World Cup qualifying window. Berhalter alluded to this, I think, back in January. This isn't a huge surprise, but it's nice to see that cemented by U.S. Soccer. We don't have an opponent for that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a CONCACAF team, but at the same time, a lot of those teams will be playing in the playoff matches at that point in time. So we'll see. So that takes us through June. July starts the Gold Cup. July 10 through August 1st is the Gold Cup. The U.S. will be playing somewhere in the United States. We know that much, basically. Then you have the Olympics starting late July, early August, and then World Cup qualifying. Now, these are the dates I think everyone was excited for. We kind of knew about the windows that they would be in, but we now have definitive dates. And I'm going to try to run through them real quick. It'll be a lot. I'm going to put out a piece on Soccer Down Here. So if you are listening to this podcast now, go to soccerdownhere.net and look at that piece so you can get the full breakdown of both the men's and women's schedules that are coming up. Okay, so World Cup qualifying for the men starts September 2nd. We don't know who yet. It'll be probably El Salvador or Trinidad and Tobago, and that is on the road. So we start September 2nd on the road. Our first home match is September 5th. Again, we don't know who that is because it will be a qualifier. And then September 8th, we travel to Honduras for a match down there. Then in October 7th, we have a home match against Jamaica. We go on the road again to another qualifier, and then our home on the 13th to host Costa Rica. So October 7, October 10, October 13. You're kind of seeing a trend. They go Thursday, Sunday, Wednesday in these 3-match windows. Then November is a 2-match window. Quite nice, especially because these are 2 tough teams. November 12th, circle that date, put it in your calendar, put it on your phone, whatever you want, however you keep track of time. November 12th is the USA home against Mexico. Big match. Don't know what that'll be yet. Can't even guarantee that it's going to be in Columbus, but November 12th, circle that date for the USA versus Mexico here in the States. Then November 16th is the game against Jamaica at Jamaica. So that's a Friday, Tuesday turnaround, which is kind of what we've been used to in the past. So that's November, and that closes out the 2021 calendar. Now, 2022 still in World Cup qualifying, opens on January 27 with a home match against some sort of qualifier, an away match on January 30 against some qualifier, and then on February 2nd is our home match against Honduras. March in 2022 is a tough window for the U.S. March 24 at Mexico. March 27th, home against a qualifier. And then March 30, final day of World Cup qualifying, is at Costa Rica. It's a lot of matches. There are going to be 14 in total, 7 at home. So that's the schedule. Again, go to soccerdownhere.net to check out the article I posted about this. Then USWNT schedule. So we've had, 5 matches for the women, 2 friendlies and 3 in the SheBelieves Cup. We found out from this board meeting from Kate Markgraf, the general manager of the U.S. women's team, that we will have a couple of friendlies in April at home. We don't know who they are yet, but they are going to be on April 10th and 13th. Then we also know that the Tournament of Nations that was scheduled for this year is definitely going on. We knew that was going to happen kind of, but it's nice to, again, see that put on the calendar for real. Don't know who the opponents are yet, but Tournament of Nations will be June 10th through 16th. Dates, opponents for real, and locations have not been officially cemented. Then in late June and early July, we will have 2 Olympic tune-up friendlies. And then the Olympics are July 21st through August 6th. And then starts the back half of the year for the women. They will have a post-Olympic tour here in the United States, all 4 matches at home, September 18, September 21, October 23rd, and October 26th. So not quite sure who we're playing. Hopefully that is a gold medal celebration tour. But that September and October window will be here. And then we go on a Euro trip to close out the year, November 25th, November 28th, and December 1st, all in Europe. I assume that's where we'll be, I should say. I can't say for sure it's Europe, but I can only assume it's going to be in Europe. That's what they hinted at. So that'll be the U.S. women's schedule. So again, I will have this up on an article on soccerdownhere.net. So go check that out, and you can see that in a visual format. 2 final pieces of information. I mentioned that the annual general meeting will be this weekend, which includes votes for new bylaws and a new USSF vice president. So current president, Cindy Parlow-Cohn, will stay in her position. She doesn't have anyone running against her. But there will be a new USSF vice president. Kobe Jones, former U.S. men's national team star, has thrown his hat in the ring for candidacy. We will have an answer to that question by the end of this weekend. There has been rumor that vote may be tabled until September. Still not sure how that will go. And then finally, World Cup host site and venue selection will be done by the end of this year for all 3 of the host countries, USA, Canada, and Mexico. USA will have 10 host cities. Canada and Mexico will have 2 each. Right now, there are 17 American cities listed. And again, they have to get down to 10. Atlanta is on that list, as well as some others. But that will have to be determined by the end of 2021. And that's all the news I have. Well, there's probably more news, but that's all the news that I wanted to share with you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Soccer for Us. Make sure you thank Jackie Gutierrez for joining me, and go follow her on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Women Kick Balls. Also go to womenkickballs.com and sign up for her email alerts and get that free sticker. Also, thank you again to American Football Provisions for sponsoring this episode, and do go to americanfootballprovisions.com and take advantage of that free shipping offer on the Play Like a Girl USA scarf. Once again, I'm Bart Keeler. I'm out.